I get this question all the time, Doc, what can I do to make myself happy? It's what we all want, right? Found an expert. He's here with us today at Live on Purpose TV. So you've heard me mention in a couple of the other videos a book and an author that I really like. Scott Wilhite, author of the 7 Core Skills of Everyday Happiness. I went and twisted his arm. I dragged him in here today. Scott, thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. I sure appreciate that.
Well, you know why you're here, right?
Because I'm an offender.
Yes, I caught you. Well, if by offender you mean you have illuminated, I think, some things that are absolutely powerful. In fact, when we did our interview on Live on Purpose Radio, I called it a game changer.
You did. And I appreciated that.
And it's this content, just to set it up, and then I want you to share some of your story.
Okay.
Will you do that? So when I interviewed Scott on the Live on Purpose Radio, the game changer that I was talking about is this concept that, yes, happiness is a choice. And you've heard me talk about that how many times now? It's also a skill. And realizing that changes the game. I think there's some history behind this, though, that it's going to help to make that all make sense. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about where you're coming from on that.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So I had heard that happiness was a choice. I'd heard that a lot, and it was the most frustrating thing that I had ever heard because I was choosing happiness, or at least I thought I was. I was doing these things that I was sure was going to make me happy. And instead, I was so frustrated, I was angry, I felt stuck, I felt trapped. I'm a filmmaker by trade. And I was living the dream on the outside. You know, I mean, it looked like my life was enviable. I was traveling the world. I was being able to be creative. I was using my talents and doing all sorts of things that, you know, boy, that should just make you happy. But inside, I was unfulfilled, I was unsatisfied, and I was angry. You know, I was trying to keep those feelings of anger inside, but they would burst outside. And they would, anyway, I remember one time I was in a location scout in another state, and I blew up with a coworker. And we spent the next 5 hours in the same car alone, not talking to each other. You know, these are grown men. But my life was starting to unravel because the harder I worked at being happy, at choosing happiness, the more frustrated I became. I was just tossed about with this, and there wasn't anything I could do because the more energy I put in, the more frustrated I became.
Can I acknowledge something right here? Because
yes, please.
When you said, you know, happiness is a choice, when you first hear that, it can be totally offensive for that very reason, because you weren't choosing misery, right?
No, I mean, I was doing what I thought I was pretty sure I needed to do, you know?
And I've found that some people do take offense to that when we say that happiness is a choice. That's why I think it's so crucial to understand what you discovered about this. But what you're sharing with us is that you know what it's like. You've been there.
I've been there. And for me, my life totally unraveled. I just about lost the things that were most important to me. You know, because all of these outbursts of anger that I would have, you know, my family was walking around on eggshells. My wife was keeping her distance. You know, they were always a little bit worried about what Dad was going to do. I was just this ball of anger and frustration. And it started to get to the point where it was, you know, coming out. And the people that I worked with recognized it, and I needed help. And the way that my work employment said we can help you is they were showing me the door. And everything was falling apart for me. The things that were most important to me, the things that are most important to me are my family and my relationships. And they were totally, you know, just falling apart because of how I was acting. And so I want you to know if you were there, if you feel that way, and you look at us and we're like these happy guys now, just understand you can absolutely get there, and you can get there quicker than you think. And the things that we're going to talk about, I don't want you to dismiss them because they seem too simple, too easy, because that's what I did too. But because I was about to hit rock bottom, I paid attention and I started to change some things in my life. So right at the time that my life was completely falling apart, I was fortunate enough to run into a guy who taught me, he introduced me to the science of happiness. I'd never heard of that before. You know, positive psychology, these top tier universities, Harvard, Stanford, UCal, Berkeley, University of Pennsylvania, that have been studying what makes people happy, what makes them resilient, how are they more successful than the rest of us, and they found a science to it. So I started reading everything I could about it, and I started to realize these consistent patterns in there, that they could take these people as kind of lab rats, and they would put them through these experiments where they would introduce different traits and qualities with them, and they could actually influence their life satisfaction levels. They could turn them from being a grumpaholic, like I was, to walking away happy. And it was by introducing simple little things that they did. And I realized that if these scientists could then influence people by introducing these traits, why can we not do it ourselves? And that's when I started to realize happiness isn't just a choice. Happiness is a skill. It's a skill I certainly wasn't very good at, but with any skill, you can get better at it.
Absolutely. I remember when your book came out, I wrote a little endorsement for your book. Do you remember this?
I do, yeah.
And I think it was on Amazon or one of the reviews that I did. But it occurred to me at the time that people sometimes are stumbling around through life trying to find their happiness, right?
Searching for this thing outside of us, where is it? And that's what I was doing.
The idea that I had, remember, it was about piano.
Oh, that's right.
And I said that's almost as ridiculous as people stumbling around through life trying to find their piano skills, right? I mean, that sounds ridiculous because that piano is a choice, right?
After it's a skill.
Piano's a choice. Sometimes when I'm playing the piano, people come up to me and say, "Oh, I wish I could play the piano." Really? You wish you could play the piano? It takes more than wishing, folks, and that's what you discovered about happiness.
Yeah, and it's simple, just like playing the piano. I mean, I know playing the piano is not simple, but there are simple things that you can do to practice, and through practice, you can get better at it to where it starts to flow, it becomes more natural, and then you have this wonderful choice. Since happiness is a skill, you can be as happy as you're willing to be anytime you want because it's totally in your hands.
Something that you can develop.
Yes.
So in your book, Scott, you've shared with us 7 core skills. These are the things that we can actually practice to get better at happiness.
Yeah.
And you know what? When you said grumpaholic, I'm like, you? That's my experience. You're cheerful. You're a positive guy, right? Mm-hmm. And you guys don't know Scott, like I know Scott.
And you don't know me in the past.
But I didn't know you in the past either. Yeah. But you're a positive guy, but you have done that on purpose. I sometimes get accused of being pathologically positive. Which is why I picked that title for my book, Pathological Positivity. And I used to think, well, is that a compliment? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I've decided that it is because it requires a lot of practice to get to the point. I sometimes think of myself as a black belt in positivity.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've become a black belt in happiness and you're still improving.
Oh, I have to work on this all the time. Discouragement is one of the things that follows me the most, and I have the hardest time with it. And so I am working on these skills all the time. I have a morning routine that I go through so that I can work on this stuff. But in the past, I mean, you see me now, you didn't see me before. Like I had a coworker, he was in another state, and every time he and I would get together, I would complain to him about the budgets, about about management, about the clients, about like all of these things that were going wrong. And now that I look back at what I was like and the kind of negativity that I spread around,
you wouldn't want to hang out with you.
I wouldn't want to hang out with me, but that's how I was like, and now I'm a completely different person because I've applied these skills.
So, your morning routine, your workout, you've listed these in your book, but in the time that we've got on this video today, can you give us a couple of those?
Yeah.
Tell us what the skills are or how you develop them.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you about 3 of the skills. And before I do that, I want to give a little bit of caution. And this is what I call the Neyman Principle. Because what we're going to share here is going to sound so simple that you may completely dismiss it. I did too. But
because
again,
sounds too simple,
but I was at rock bottom. So back in the Old Testament times, there was this guy named Neyman. He had a whole lot of stuff. He was wealthy, he was rich, he was powerful, but he also had leprosy. Well, he didn't want that. He had some servant that told him about this man of God who could cure him. And so he goes to visit this man of God, and this guy, I think it was Elisha or Elijah, I can't remember. But
you get them all mixed up.
Yeah, I know. One of those guys. But he tells him that if he will go and wash himself 7 times in the river Jordan, he will be cured of his leprosy. Well, Neyman goes away so irate. Are you kidding me? Wash myself in a river, that's going to cure me? That's kind of what can happen to you as you listen to some of these skills. So please don't dismiss them because they're so simple. Common sense is not always common practice, but as you listen to them, kind of figure out, okay, maybe there's something there. That's again what I did. Rock bottom, I'm like, maybe there's something there. If I can start applying these on a consistent, repeated basis, maybe something will happen.
And simple and easy aren't the same thing.
They're not. They're not.
Okay, so it might be hard to actually implement some of these skills, although they are very simple.
They are. Yeah.
So we'll do that little disclaimer too.
Very good. We have lots of disclaimers.
So share a few of those.
Okay. So the very first one, the king skill of all, if you have this skill, you can be happy whenever you want, wherever you are, in whatever circumstances you're in. And that is the skill of gratitude. I mean, it's as simple as that. And gratitude, I do have to tell you, it's not thankfulness. And you could actually turn thankfulness negative, and I would often do that because I would thank people for helping me out. And really what I meant was, dang it, I'm less of a man because you helped me out. Now I feel inferior. I'm indebted. Yeah, so I would take a positive and turn it into a negative. And what gratitude is gratitude is recognizing that you are the recipient of deliberate kindness. You know, there's this connection between you and another person, and that connection is love. There's this bond. And you are the fortunate recipient of deliberate kindness that you didn't earn, that you didn't necessarily deserve. And it connects you, and it's this beautiful thing. And so if you can elevate your gratitude levels, and you can, anytime you want,
by practicing
it, by repetition. You know, simple practices can be a gratitude journal, can be writing 5 things a day or 3 things a day, or, you know, a weekly dump or something like that. But you work on your skill. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast today about a guy who, when he wakes up, he will, you know, before he does anything else, he will think of 3 to 10 things that he's grateful for that he has never thought of before, because he wants to really stretch that muscle, because it's that important.
Gratitude.
Awesome. Who would have known?
Glad you started with that one, Scott.
Yeah. So another one that you can have is the skill to be fully present. You know, to be here, to be now. And I call it savor the now. You know, so often we're just running around, we're rushing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, that we never really have time. We never really take the time to stop and to pause and to enjoy what we have right now. And so, you know, I like the word savor.
That's good.
You know, because I like to eat. But when I eat, you know, like, you know, a dessert or something like that, I want it to last just as long as possible. But what if you do that with your life? You know, what if you are fully present in the moment? Maybe you're here or you're with your kids, and you're actually right there. You're enjoying that moment, and you're just savoring every little bit about it.
And staying in the now.
Yeah, I'm sure that you have had experiences where maybe you've shaken hands with people, and they will shake your hand and they will kind of be looking for who's going to be next that they're going to talk to.
Oh.
Or that you're in a conversation with somebody and you realize they're not quite here because they're probably thinking about what they're going to say next. You know, they're not really listening to your comments and your conversations. They're not fully present. When you can be fully present, when you can be here, when you can be now, you're at peace. You're not in the future, you're not in the past, you're right here in the now. Yeah.
Awesome. You promised us 3.
Okay.
Time for one more?
Okay, we have time for one more. The third one is to lift someone else. It's the service component.
Service.
Now, I know that I'm sure everybody knows you feel better when you volunteer, when you help somebody else out. Yeah. But very rarely do we do it. You know, we know it, but knowing is not practicing. Again, it's this common sense is not always common practice, but if you can put things into your life to where you're consistently reaching outside of yourself, connecting yourself to humankind, all of a sudden you're important, you're valued, you are a contributor, and you feel it. So, I mean, these are 3 skills where you can get happy now. You can absolutely change.
So you can actually make yourself happy.
Yeah, absolutely. You have the power. It's an inside job, and it's up to you. You can be absolutely as happy as you're willing to be. Takes a little bit of work, does a phenomenal job.
See that, you guys? I'm not the only crazy guy that thinks this is possible. I got it from the master. Scott Wilhite, thanks.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Scott Wilhite, what a great guy who has captured something that's absolutely powerful. You can find his information in the description below and leave a little comment. I'll see if I can get Scott to respond.